around my story.
My life has taught me that each one of us has more than one face. And there are faces that are much worse than our nightmares. My name is Susan, and the story I will tell you needs to understand my reasons before judging me. When I was in school, I was one of the celebrities that all the kids wanted to be with, including Josh, one of the school bullies, who was obsessed with me and tried to get close to me in every way. But I could not, because I had always rejected him. But also, this was not my reality, which I hid because my family was very poor, and I was embarrassed to show them to my friends or to anyone. And at that time, I became in relationship with my friend Max. And Max was one of the boys that I could call the idiots of the school because he was very mean, and the rest of the students were surprised that I chose him. And despite this, all the students, even the bullies, including Josh, were afraid of Max and could never get close to him, which was strange. The days passed, and I left Max. I left the city with my family, and our financial conditions turned from bad to worse. And one day, when I was leaving the university, a young man in a very cool car stood in front of me and smiled at me without speaking before introducing himself that he is Max, the school friend. He searched a lot until he found my address. Yes, this is strange, but the splendor of his car and the surprise of the situation made me forget everything, and then we became into a relationship again. He was very rich, and his house was like palaces. I was not mainly interested in knowing the source of this money because I knew that Max's father was rich since the school days, and this is not strange. But over time, I noticed his strange behavior. I became sure of my suspicions that there was something strange when I found a large quantity of drugs in one of Max's bags. At first I hid that, but at some point, I told him what I saw and that I knew he was a drug dealer. At that time, he was very calm and told me that each one of us has something to hide, and this was my truth. I was just a girl who had been lying that she was someone else all her life. But I couldn't bear this situation, and that's why I called the police. They came to Max's house and arrested him and his men, except for a group that managed to escape. They gave me a big financial reward because Max was one of the most dangerous wanted drug men, but I lost Max forever. Of course, it was not true love, but this does not prevent that it caused me great pain. I decided to leave all this and go back to my family, but I did not find them and received a message. My family was kidnapped by Max's men, and they asked me to come to a place on the outskirts of the city if I wanted to see them again. Everything collapsed in my mind, and I felt like I was in a nightmare, and there was no solution for me other than to listen to their words and go to that place. There, Max's men came out to me with my family in handcuffs. For a moment, I was about to cry, but I held on. Immediately, the shooting started between the police and Max's men as I told the police what happened and they were hiding in the place. At that time, a bullet hit my brother. The gangsters were arrested while I broke down. And I met Josh again, the school bully in the past, who was then one of the policemen who arrested the gangsters. The bullet that hit my brother caused his death, and I lost one of the closest people to me. But Josh never left me after that, and I got back in this ordeal. At that time, I made sure that I was stupid when I rejected him a long time ago and chose a fake face, just as I was fake too.
Hi, I'm Gamila. Have you ever experienced a life problem? I know everyone has their own problems, but imagine you had to hide something all your life. Do you know what it feels like? If not, let me tell you. My name is Gamila. It means beautiful in Arabic, and I really am beautiful, or so I've been told. But I have a problem. I always wear a glove on my left hand anywhere I go, because I'm too embarrassed to show it to anyone. This has become my life problem. You see, I've had 7 fingers on my left hand since birth. My family couldn't afford a surgery to remove these extra 2 fingers. It would have cost a lot of money, and I would have had to travel abroad because we didn't have clever doctors or good hospitals in my area. So I've been wearing a glove on my left hand since I was young. as a temporary solution for this problem. People always ask me about the glove, but I never answer. I just say that my fingers get cold. You would see me in the summer wearing a short, sleeveless blouse and a glove on my left hand. There were a lot of things I had to give up because of my hand. Once, I wanted to play gymnastics. My mom was okay with it, so I went to many places to train, but they all refused to accept me because of my seven-fingered hand, which they considered to be a problem. At school, my classmates would laugh and ridicule me a lot, so I never had a lot of friends, just a few. I got into the college of my dreams. I thought that people might stop this bullying, so I considered taking off the glove. But I was afraid, because I was going to join a new society, so I didn't. I went with the glove instead. I was surprised at the amount of bullying at college, more than I had ever seen. It was a good thing that I decided to wear my glove. There were a lot of bullies there. Then, something happened. It became a turning point in my life. One time, while I was standing and speaking with my friends, one of them suddenly pulled off my glove. This glove was old and wasn't very tight on my hand. I had been intending to buy a new one after school, but they all discovered my secret. Some were astonished, while others started making fun of me and bullying me. I stopped going to university for a whole week. People blamed me for something that wasn't my fault, but that was the story of my life. If I hid away now, I'd be in this mess forever. So I decided never to wear that glove again. I decided to face my fears. I am beautiful enough to live a good life. I decided to ignore all the bullies and take care of myself. I went to my college. I didn't care about people's opinions. I focused on my studies, had great success, and proved to myself and to others that I was not disabled. The disabled can't think or succeed. Later, when I was attending a lecture by a famous doctor, he noticed my hand and offered to operate on it and make it look normal. This surgery would be the first of its kind in my country, and I accepted. When I saw my hand after the surgery, I couldn't believe myself. Bullying can ruin people's lives, but as they say, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. I don't really like Indian movies because the actors are always overreacting, and the movies are not logical at all. But this is just my personal opinion. However, I've discovered that there are stories stranger than Indian movies. Let me give you a real-life example. I'll tell you a story about a young woman named Samantha. Samantha was a beautiful girl with blonde hair and green eyes. She lived with her grandmother after her parents died in a horrible car accident. The whole country read about it. She had many friends, and all the neighbors liked her. They considered her the most beautiful girl in town. Many had proposed to her, but she didn't care much for them. One day, Samantha was walking alone down the street after visiting one of her friends. Suddenly, she had an eerie feeling that someone was following her. She began running and crying for help. Her follower began running and stopped her. He was an ugly man, pointing a knife in her direction. He asked her to hand over her purse. She threw it at him and made a run for it. The man said wait and made to stop her, but another man appeared out of nowhere and punched the thief, who fell unconscious. The brave and good Samaritan picked up Samantha's purse and handed it to her. He was very handsome, with green eyes, soft hair, and an amazing smile. He escorted her back home, and she felt that he was her knight in shining armor. She went inside and hugged her grandmother tight, who was a little surprised but smiled. Samantha was so happy that she gently pulled her grandmother to her feet, and they whirled around and danced playfully. The very next day, she was surprised when she answered the doorbell. Steve, the tall, handsome man, was standing there, holding flowers. He proposed to her, and she said yes. Thus began their love story. Then one day, Samantha was standing in the kitchen preparing dinner. Steve and her grandmother were out, but they were supposed to be back soon. Samantha had everything ready, and she set the table. The house door opened, and Steve walked in. Samantha went to greet him, but she felt dizzy and fainted. Steve quickly took her to the hospital. The doctor congratulated Steve, saying that he was going to be a father. Steve was ecstatic, but Samantha was not. Instead, she was shocked and nervous. She said that she was too young to have kids, that she wasn't ready to be a mother. Steve was taken aback and said, "But why? Don't you want him?" Things were different from that point on. Samantha tried to get an abortion several times, but Steve was always stopping her. She couldn't accept it. She blamed Steve, but Steve couldn't understand her. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Samantha was with her grandmother at the supermarket when she saw a small boy run onto the road. Fearing he might get run over by a car, Samantha quickly pulled the boy off the road to safety. The boy's mother saw what happened and thanked Samantha, feeling so grateful and relieved. Samantha was crying at the moment and replied, "No need to thank me. I'm going to be a mother like you soon." For the first time, she was beginning to feel real affection for the baby. "Forgive me," she silently thought to herself. She tried to contact Steve many times to tell him that she had finally accepted. She was ready to become a mother, but he never responded. Finally, the day had come. Samantha went to the hospital to give birth. After the surgery, she was very tired. Nevertheless, when she woke up, she immediately asked for the baby. Her grandmother handed her the child. It was a daughter, and she was so beautiful. The nurse tried to take the baby out of her arms, but Samantha refused, wanting to hold her for as long as she could. The next day, Samantha heard a big commotion, and she had a feeling of dread that something bad had just happened. It was confirmed when she saw her grandmother's face. She asked what had happened, and her grandmother told her that a child was missing and had apparently been kidnapped. Samantha's pale face slowly pleaded, "Please don't tell me that it was my daughter." When her grandmother nodded, Samantha broke down and began crying and wailing in pain. The nurses tried to calm her down, and when she did, her grandmother came over to her and handed her a note. It had been found in her missing daughter's hospital crib. It was in Steve's handwriting. It simply said, "If you don't want her, I do." Then Samantha fainted. For many years, she tried finding her baby, but couldn't. Steve and her daughter had vanished into thin air. She felt as if time had stopped for her. But Steve didn't feel that way. He raised their daughter into a beautiful young woman. He named her Margot. Whenever Margot asked about her mother, Steve would always tell her that her mother was dead. But he often told her stories about her mother and how much he had loved her. Margot's intuition, however, told her that her father wasn't being completely honest with her and that he was hiding some big dark secret. One day, Steve fell ill unexpectedly. He called Margot to him and told her that he was very sick and felt that he was going to die soon. He said that he wanted to reveal a secret that he had long kept from her, that her mother was actually alive, and that her name was Samantha. He told her that he had kidnapped her from the hospital at birth because her mother did not want a child. He regretted it and asked Margot to forgive him. He gave her Samantha's address, and soon after, he died. After his death, Margot decided to go looking for her mother. I am Margot, and I am now standing at my mother's address. At her front door, I cannot predict my mother's reaction when she answers the door and I introduce myself as her daughter, but I'm going to hug her and tell her that I've missed her for so long. Hello, I'm Sarah. Ever heard of a phobia before? Don't worry, it's not contagious or anything. It just means you're scared of something in particular. Places, people, things. I have a phobia, but I don't like to talk about it, and I definitely don't want to be seen in that state. I was in my 2nd year at college. I had been very busy that semester because we had a lot of assignments, and it was fine. I mean, I liked studying and completing tasks, but I was never a nerd or a geek. No. I like to dress nicely too. I had my own fashion and style. It wasn't easy making friends though. There were 2 types of people at my school. Smart nerds who couldn't care less how they dress, and complete airheads who dressed nice. I didn't fit in either one of those groups, so I basically kept to myself until one day I got assigned to do a task with a girl and a boy, Jane and Kyle. They didn't look nerdy at all, and I thought to myself, oh great, looks like I'll be doing all the work. But when we started talking about the project, they didn't just sit there or toss ridiculous retorts. All 3 of us were having an actual conversation about the topic. I was so thrilled. It finally seemed like I belonged somewhere. We became friends and did everything together. We could tell each other anything. Well, not everything. I had one secret from my friends. I never told them I had a phobia. Anyway, a year later, Jane moved to Germany with her parents. She was going to finish college there. So it was just Kyle and I now. All through college, we were the best of friends. We even did our graduation project together. On graduation day, Kyle and I were supposed to go out for dinner. He wouldn't tell me where, said it was a surprise. And what a surprise it was. He had picked the highest tower in the whole city to eat dinner at the very top. I don't have a problem with high places in particular. In fact, I'm sure I'll love the view if I ever make it to the top. No, I had a problem with the elevator. A phobia, to be precise. So we were standing at the base of the tower, and Kyle was happily listing all the great features and restaurants up there, but I didn't hear any of it. I was too busy fretting, frozen to the spot, desperately trying to find a way out of the situation. I couldn't say no to Kyle, who was all excited to go up the tower, so I clenched it in and tried my best to stay calm. We got in the elevator, and the doors shut. I couldn't control what came after that. I was terrified, screaming and shouting hysterically, banging on the walls, then falling to the ground. Of course, I don't actually remember any of it. Kyle told me later on. The last thing I remember was the elevator doors shutting close. When I came to, I was at the hospital. Kyle was sitting by my bed looking worried. When he saw that I woke up and that I was feeling fine, he started laughing at me, saying, "Why didn't you tell me you had a phobia?" I felt ridiculous and started laughing too. And then, out of nowhere, he proposed. It was his plan all along, although he pictured it at the top of the tower. All that happened 3 years ago. We're married now, and we have a baby girl. I'm being treated for my phobia. It's not completely gone, but I'm way better now. Apparently, hiding my problems never solves them. I'll have to face them, sooner or later. I am addicted to food. I suffer a lot. I need help. I've tried to give up, but I fail every time. Hamburgers. Who can give up eating hamburgers, especially with barbecue sauce? I didn't mind this kind of addiction, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me begin by introducing myself. I am Patricia, 15 years old, living with my parents and my brother. I lead a quiet life. No interests, no hobbies, except for eating, that is. Food is my faithful friend. It never leaves me. It is my partner, my soulmate. But having food as your soulmate has insidious side effects. A dark side, if you will. It denies me a healthy life, robs me of the energy to play, and causes me to sleep excessively. I would much rather stay at home with a bag of potato chips than go out and exercise. My soulmate ultimately betrayed me, though, last Thanksgiving at my granny's home. She lives in a state nearby. Granny was a clever doctor, and an excellent cook at that. She could conjure up something really delicious. On that day, she had prepared barbecue turkey with nuts and other secret recipe ingredients. The taste was so great, as if it had descended from heaven itself. I felt like I was fighting a food war, and I had to win at all costs. I ate and ate and ate. I don't know why, but I just couldn't control myself. I attacked that turkey like it was the last on the planet. But every culinary war with a worthy adversary, such as the barbecued turkey, has its own unique type of casualties. Suddenly, I found myself unable to breathe. I fell to my knees and passed out. The turkey had won. I woke up later in the hospital, though, still clinging to an unfinished turkey leg. The doctor told me that I was gaining way too much weight. He said that I should be put on a diet. Diet? Man, how I hated that word. It hung over my head like the sword of Damocles. It meant depriving me of my passion, my reason for living. I considered eating vegetables in small amounts to be the worst form of cruel and unusual punishment, the worst form of torture imaginable. Imagine thinking of a wonderful, greasy, cheese-laden pizza with all the toppings and then suddenly opening your eyes to find a healthy green salad bowl. But I had reached a turning point in life. One day, my brother was playing on the street, while I was sitting at home gazing longingly at a tempting piece of cheesecake, just sitting there, taunting, daring me to eat it. I struggled mightily to resist the urge, but in the end I succumbed and wolfed it down like a starving animal. Shortly afterwards, I began feeling dizzy, but I was unable to call for help this time, and then I passed out again. I was taken to the hospital. While lying in the hospital bed, half conscious, I overheard the doctor say to someone, "She needs to stop eating or it will be the death of her." I thought to myself, whoa, death? So I made up my mind right then, right there. I resolved to fight a new war, a war against my appetite. On our way back home, I told my father that I wanted to see a nutritionist. He was delighted to hear that. Later, at the clinic, the doctor welcomed us in. She told me how to overcome my eating fetish. She gave me a strict diet regimen with a schedule full of healthy meals. I kept telling myself that winning this war was possible. I simply had to be patient and persevere. I stuck to the strict diet and did some physical workouts. My parents supported me wholeheartedly. I was enthusiastic. I can totally do this. A week passed quickly, and I eagerly visited the doctor to receive some good news. When the doctor weighed me and told me that my weight hadn't changed at all, I was crestfallen. She looked at me and asked me, how was this possible? I told her I didn't know, because I was following her diet thoroughly, though it did require a tremendous effort on my part. Another week passed, and again I went to the doctor. The results were the same. She said to me, Patricia, are you sure you're following the diet I prescribed for you? I said yes. She sat there wondering. Then she told me with a puzzled look on her face, it's odd, but your weight is increasing, not decreasing. This unexpected piece of news mystified me. Another week passed. No change. The doctor was nonplussed. I returned home with a dejected look on my face. My father asked me what was wrong. And when I told him, he laughed. Do you believe that? My father actually laughed at my predicament. I was furious. He gestured an apology with his hand and then told me that it was my own fault. I was puzzled. What are you talking about? He told me that I had been sleepwalking to the refrigerator every night and eating everything in sight. I was taken aback. I couldn't believe it. Stop acting like he didn't know it, he said. You must have been awake. I replied, no, father, I'm not acting. I was truly unaware that I've been sleepwalking and eating in my sleep. But now that we've finally solved the mystery of the increasing weight, we returned to the doctor with this new information and told her the situation. She laughed and told me that my discipline had denied my body the food it craved, but my brain had refused to cooperate and had overridden my will by urging me to eat in a subconscious state. She told me not to worry, though, that she could treat that. Armed with this knowledge and her support, and the support of my family, I felt that I could finally win this war.
Hello, my name is Kate. Now I'm going to say this. I am by no means a saint, and the only reason I brought this up is later in the story. So, I dated this guy in high school for 2 years. He was the love of my life, and I planned on marrying him. His dad became super controlling, and eventually he forced us to break up. He immediately got into a relationship with another girl, and I moved on. Later on, I met this guy who, we will call Max, and he was a mix between country and scene. He liked artists like Lil Peep, and also was in love with horses. He had a girlfriend who lived across the country, but we stayed friends. They eventually broke up, and naturally, we both grew closer. Dear God, I regret ever saying yes to going out with him. The first 2 months, they were constant fighting. He wanted us to visit his ex-girlfriend because she was failing college and addicted to coke while we were together. He would sometimes text her while he was at my house or while we were at dinner, but eventually he quit. The next few months were okay at best. He would constantly start fights with my male friends and even assumed I was cheating on him with one friend who at the time did have a crush on me. But I'm a very loyal person who went as far as to put more of my time into hanging out with my boyfriend than my friends. Eventually, we went on a cruise and he got high with a group of girls and kissed one of them. I cut it off and went on to date others. So, he texted me 3 months after breaking up, saying he wants to talk and apologize for what he did. I was still in love with him, so I agreed and we set up a time for when he could come over. I knew instantly when he pulled into my driveway that I was going to regret ever responding. There was no hug, no I miss you, none of that. Instead, he walks up to me, looks me in the eye and says, I want to get this out of the way. I've dated a lot of people since we broke up. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I mean, I did the same when we broke up. So, I kind of agreed to being just friends and never go back to talking about getting back together for now. But then comes the bullshit. He calls me one night and says, hey, I want to get back with you. Because honestly, Wandering around is boring, and I don't want to jump into things instantly. And I was wondering if dating without labels would be okay with you. When I asked him to elaborate, he replied, as in, I can still go to dinner with other girls, you can go to dinner with other guys, and we'll see what happens. Needless to say, I hung up without saying a word. Told him thanks, but no thanks. You are not who you used to be, and I'm not interested anymore. Bonus chapter. He stopped a few weeks, but he would periodically send me pictures of him at parties or on dates with other girls or pictures of his private areas. Anyways, ever since he has been blocked on everything, but I just thought I would share this with you. This is a shout out to every girl out there. Please find someone that's worth your love and affection, not someone who wants to play with it. Don't we all feel special sometimes? I grew up in an orphan house. I'm not trying to pretend that there was anything special about it, but I grew up with this nagging voice inside my head telling me how special I am and that my life will eventually turn upside down. It turned out I was not being delusional or anything. What happened to me was every foster child's dream. If only I knew what my future held for me. My mom, dad, and twin sister committed suicide in 1992. I was saved by my extended family only to get abandoned later. I was disowned not because two of the wealthiest families in the city couldn't raise me, but because I was a curse for their reputation. My mom and dad were not married, and that brought them so much shame until they took their own lives. Fast forward few months later, one day I woke up at a children's home. I'm an orphan now. I have absolutely no memories of my parents or even my twin sister, but I do remember my extended family very well. They gave me up when I was 6 years old. My uncle is an extremely rich businessman. He was never really bad to me. In fact, he put me in what you can call a fancy home. Although he promised to visit me every weekend, he never did. I was put in a medium-sized room with 4 other girls, Rosaline, Claire, Bella, and me, Rachel. They were all dressed in clean nightgowns, but they were all the same color, pale green. Mrs. Milton, our guardian, gave me a similar gown to put on. It felt as if I was admitted into kids' military. Our hair was always put up in a tight bun. We all looked the same. Mrs. Milton was not the kindest person you could come across, but she wasn't evil either. The house was divided into 2 sections, one for the boys and one for the girls. The only time we met the boys was in the outside building, which was some sort of a school. We took a few classes every day, and to be honest, we had some really good teachers. I always sat next to a boy called Nate. I thought he was super smart, and he always helped with my math homework because numbers were never really my field of expertise. We eventually became really good friends. Whenever I went back to the room, all the girls were too occupied with their toys, and they were all good friends already. It felt like I was an outsider. However, a few months later, I became the alpha of the group. Don't get me wrong, this is not another Oliver Twist story. We used to pull pranks on each other all the time, and we had a really good laugh. I mean, being in a foster home is not exactly a vacation, so we made the best out of a bad situation. When the girls would go to sleep at night, I would go fake sleeping until Mrs. Milton had gone to sleep as well. Then I would stare out that tiny, teeny window and start counting the stars one by one. I named one after my dad, one after my mom, one after my twin sister, and finally, one after Nate. I would stay up all night long daydreaming until I fell asleep. Mrs. Milton would wake us up around 6 a.m. to have breakfast and go to class. It went on like that for years and years. Every day seemed exactly like the other, except on the weekends, which wasn't really much of a weekend. It only meant we were allowed to eat dessert.
I have always been an extremely curious little girl, and the reason Nate and I grew so close was because he was a curious boy as well. We had no idea about the outside world. We had so many unanswered questions, and sometimes we would make up answers to tame our brains. The girls had relatives visiting them during the weekend, but I would stay in my room. Sometimes I cried, and sometimes I shut my eyes close and tried to imagine what my mom looked like. One day during science class, Nate asked me who visits me on the weekend. I never said anything back. I pretended that I didn't even hear him. But in a moment of extreme confusion and sadness, I wrote something down on a piece of paper and passed it to him. It said, "Let's get out of here." We were 12 years old at the time. I didn't care about the consequences at all. All I cared about was getting outside of here and exploring what was happening in the outside world. I wanted to go back to my uncle, even if he didn't want me. Nate looked at the paper, folded it into half, and he freaking swallowed the paper, and he just nodded his head at me. I wasn't sure what he meant by the nod until at midnight. While I was looking at the stars I befriended for years now, I heard the slip of a paper under the door. I quickly got up and the paper said, "Meet me at the school building in 5 minutes." I slowly opened the door and ran downstairs. Nate and I stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do. We started discussing a runaway plan. But seriously though, what could two kids do to escape a fully guarded huge building? We were smarter than any of you would think. For the next week, we studied every movement happening around the place. When security guards changed their shifts, which teachers left class early, we even memorized the times when Mrs. Milton had to use the bathroom. We had a solid plan. At the end of the week, on Friday, we had history class, and the teacher always left a few minutes early. At the same exact time, security guards changed their shifts, and Mrs. Milton took about 3 to 4 minutes to come downstairs and walk us back to our rooms. That was it. That was the moment I have been looking for all along. We passed by the guard's back and we ran and ran like there was no tomorrow. After a few blocks, we were out of breath. We were two kids dressed exactly alike with no money and no place to go. But we couldn't stop, not after we finally did it. We kept on walking and walking until it was night. I looked up at the sky and I could not believe my eyes. The sky had endless stars. I let my hair down and got rid of that stupid bun I've had for years. I decided that Nate and I could go into a shop and ask for a suitable job that could offer us a place to live and food. Yes, I was that smart, and I still am. So we went into a grocery store owned by an old lady. We told her our story, and what she said back was, "I need to call the police." And so we begged and cried and begged, and the lady had a big heart. She offered us some sandwiches and said we could help deliver groceries around the block. We immediately agreed. Nate and I had to sleep on a blanket inside the store every night. It was not a great situation, but we loved that sense of freedom. We felt like we were hero kids with superpowers. We stayed with the old lady for what seemed like a year. If you haven't guessed it by now, I was in love with Nate. I had our wedding planned inside my head, and although he never said anything back, I knew he loved me even more. One day we heard that old lady talking to an officer who was looking for two lost kids. We grabbed all the cash we could and ran through the back door. I know it's inconsiderate to rob the woman who provided for us, but there was no other way. We quickly stopped the cab and asked the driver to drive as far as possible. He gave us a weird look, but when we showed him the money, he started driving. At this point, Nate held my hand for the first time ever, and he said, "We'll be okay." I felt my heart melt to the ground, but traffic noise brought me back to my senses. The cab driver was driving funny, but none of us was really familiar with driving, so we never really paid much attention. I looked at Nate and he said, "We need to find my uncle. He's rich, he can help. You can hide in my room. Or he can even adopt us, I don't know." My voice was shaky. Nate replied and said, "Hey, calm down. I promise we're going to be fine. Rachel, we have each other. This is all that matters. And I will help you find your uncle." I didn't hear the rest of his words. I woke up in a hospital bed. I screamed at the top of my lungs. A nurse came in and I said, "Who are you? Why am I here? I need to leave right now. Where's Nate?" The nurse gave me a pill and some water. She said, "Calm down. You'll be fine. Your friend is fine. You got into a car accident. What's your name?" I pushed her hand away and refused to take the pill. "My name is Rachel and I need to see my friend right now." The nurse just left me. Then an officer came in. He started asking questions and I kept asking to see Nate. I never answered any of his questions. I asked him to call the nurse again and she came back. I asked her to help me sit straight because I could barely feel my legs. Maybe I'd been sleeping for too long, I don't know. She just stood there. I looked down and I didn't have legs. What happened?" I asked. "The accident happened, Rachel," the nurse replied. "Now I'm a crippled orphan?" No, that couldn't be true. I'm not sure why, but I was super calm. And I asked, "What happened to my friend?" "He is okay. Where are your parents?" I stared up at the white ceiling and never said anything back. I don't know how, but it was suddenly next day morning and the officer woke me up. I told him the whole story and I described my uncle and his business name. I needed all the help I could get, but no one was telling me anything about Nate. The doctor explained that I will be able to walk again, but it might take up to a few years. Later that day, my uncle came. I had an ocean of mixed feelings, but my eyes were stoned. I couldn't shed a single tear. The first thing he said was, "Why did you do that to yourself, honey?" He dared to call me honey and to blame me for his own doing. I half smiled and said, "The doctor said I'll walk again. Have you heard anything about my friend?" He told me that Nate had a brain concussion and he's in a coma. And that was when my stone eyes melted. I felt guilty. It was me who made him run away. If it wasn't for me, maybe he would have been fine now. "Uncle Todd, could you please call in the doctor for me?" I asked. The doctor was very understanding. Although he did not have a full picture of what was going on, he explained to me that Nate will be fine, and I believed him. My uncle paid for my surgery and for Nate's stay as well. How confusing. If he had such a big heart, why did he admit me to a foster home? I lost count of the days. I wished I was back at the orphanage sitting next to Nate while he helped me with my homework. A month passed by, and Nate was doing a lot better. I saw him a few times, and I was able to walk a few steps with the help from the nurses. My uncle visited from time to time, and I could tell he was trying to make it up to me. But wasn't that just a bit too late? 6 months later, we were both sent back to the orphanage with reports that Nate is at a risk of a brain stroke, and that I couldn't walk or stand for too long. My uncle offered that we stayed at his house, but we both knew he never meant it. Back at the orphanage, we were treated differently. It wasn't just the same. Things have changed. Mrs. Milton had quit. The new guardian was called Mrs. Buffy, like the one from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Let me tell you that that woman was not kind. During break time, Nate and I would discuss what we wanted to pursue as careers. Because we only had a few years left here, and then we could just leave without having to run away. Nate wanted to become a programmer. The guy was a true genius. And I wasn't so sure of what I wanted. But if you guys still remember the beginning of my story, I knew I was destined for something special. Mrs. Buffy caught us exchanging love letters, and Nate and I were forbidden from sitting next to each other in class. Well, except during history class, because the teacher didn't really care much about anything. We were also expert sneakers by now, so we managed to steal a kiss every now and then. Things were starting to get better. I could walk better, and Nate could talk better, because he had a problem with stuttering. A year passed by, and we were about to leave the orphanage and go to college in less than 6 months. One day during break, Nate started throwing up. Mrs. Buffy refused to even call a doctor. The next morning, he couldn't speak at all in class, and he started throwing up again and again. I ran up to Mrs. Buffy to take him to the hospital, and she replied, "We can't afford hospital, Rachel," and looked the other way. "Call my uncle right now," I screamed at her. "Fine," she said in a very careless voice. My uncle came, and Mrs. freaking Buffy refused that I go with them. And so my uncle took Nate to the hospital. After 4 hours, my uncle came back, and without my consent, he demanded I leave and go home with him. I was so concerned and just went with him. I kept on asking questions, and he said nothing back. He parked in front of his mansion, and he said, "They tried their best at the hospital. I'm so sorry." And he hugged me for the first time ever. I pushed him back, and he said, "What does that mean? Do you mean that Nate is gone?" And then my uncle started crying. He invited me to go inside, but I refused. No, no way. Nate couldn't just leave me like that. I walked away. I sat on the pavement recalling all the memories we had together. I looked at my artificial legs and kicked them so hard, but I didn't feel a thing. I lived with my uncle for a year, on the condition that I will pay rent until I could move out. What if Mrs. freaking Buffy had called the doctor? Wouldn't Nate be here right now? I had nightmares about killing her every single night. I got a part-time job as a teacher. I paid my rent and saved the rest for college. I finally knew what I wanted to study. I wanted to study journalism. I worked day and night until I could afford college. I sent hate letters to Miss Buffy every now and then. As soon as I graduated, I landed a 1 in a million job. I worked for the biggest newspaper in town. I moved out from my uncle's, but we are on good terms. 2 years later, I went back to the orphanage, only to find out that another kid had died due to lack of responsibility. Although Mrs. Buffy was old and even grumpier now, it didn't stop me from getting back at her. I wrote every detail of Nate's story and submitted it to my boss. He never even knew I grew up in an orphanage. The story went viral. I was even interviewed to share more details on television. Finally, Mrs. Buffy went to prison after a long trial. Ah, I could almost hear Nate smile in heaven right now. I may not have legs, and I may get bullied every now and then, but I have Nate living inside my heart. After things went viral on social media, I was able to get enough donations to open my own foster home in Nate's name, and to forever honor his name. See, I told you, I was destined for something extra special. I usually host a slumber party once a month, so my girlfriends already know the drill. They bring their jammies, blankets, nail polish, hair products, lots of snacks, candies, and chocolates, but this time, Lucy brought wine. She had to sneak the wine in my house because my mom is kind of strict when it comes to drinking. My dad is almost never home. My mom sleeps really early, so we kinda had the house all to ourselves. We put on onesies, random dresses, and some costumes. My favorite is the Cinderella dress, and I still like wearing it even if I'm 17 now. We're all 17. I have three best friends, Lucy, Ashley, and Sheila. We have lots of fun and lots of secrets together. Sometimes I wish time would stop so we can always have each other. I know time will come that I will be separated from them. College will happen, and we'll have different lives in different circles. At least for now, we can be silly high school kids. We have an ideal high school life. We all have boyfriends, but mine is the most popular one. Well, I'm pretty popular at my school too. I also do well with academics. None of my friends are failing or anything. We're not the typical popular cheerleaders with no brains type. We do not have family drama. Our social life is great. We have the best high school life ever. While dancing and partying all night, Lucy came up with an idea. She said, "Let's play Truth or Dare." We got giddy because we know the night is going to get crazy. We sat down, forming a circle, then Lucy spun the bottle, and the bottle chose me. Truth or dare? Truth. Not in the mood for a dare yet, I said. Pick a question. They prepared some questions on a piece of paper and put them inside a fishbowl. If you could choose to be someone else for tonight, who would you choose and why? Lucy asked. I just laughed and said, "What a lame question. I don't want to be anybody else. I'm awesome. I have an awesome life." Cheers to that, they said. The night passed and I woke up in the middle of the night because I felt like someone was watching me, but when I woke up, no one was around. I don't know how, but my feet just started moving. I walked like I was trying to follow something or someone. My gut feelings are trying to bring me somewhere. Then, in the middle of the darkness in our backyard, I swear I heard footsteps. I felt a sting on my left shoulder. Something poked my shoulder. I removed it. I guess it's a tranquilizer? And then I passed out. From here on, listen carefully because I guarantee you're going to love this story. It's like a movie, and I cannot believe that this thick plot is actually my life. I tried putting together the stories that happened while I was gone, and someone else was being me. I know it sounds complicated, but before I proceed, do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell button for notifications. So here it goes. Someone tranquilized me, and I instantly fell asleep. By the way, my name is Nancy. You have met my friends, and I'm sure you'd like to know who drugged me and what the motive is. Meet Patricia. At first, I had no idea why she looked exactly like I do. I thought I was dreaming. Before passing out, I asked her who she was. She told me that her name is Nancy. She was obviously messing with me. Then she told me that her name is Patricia, and that she is my twin, and she would love to be Nancy instead. What? I did not believe her because I don't have a twin sister. My mom and dad would never keep any secrets from me. Or would they? She said that she was kept by our parents in a mental institution a couple of hours away from our town, ever since we were 3. I just realized that I have no recollection of any kind of memories when I was only 3 years old. At first I thought, wow, is this really happening? I just think I watched too much TV. But this is reality. How did it happen? Let me tell you how it happened. Well, at first, she tranquilized me while I was asleep. I think she had other people with her who dragged me into a pickup, covered my mouth, tied me up, and blindfolded me. And then they brought me into a dark basement, I think. I'm not sure, because when I woke up, everything was just a blur. I only saw her face. I thought I was looking in the mirror. She told me everything that I needed to know. Well, her version of the story. I was shocked, but I would like to know my mom and dad's version of the story as well. Patricia told me that they got her locked up in a mental institution with special care. My mom did not like the idea, but eventually agreed when Patricia looked at her and said, "Daddy's next." I got the chills, but she never told me the reason why she ended up in the mental institution. She has been following me ever since we were 14 years old. One of the security staff has got a crush on her, so she's able to go in and out when no one is looking. She wants me dead because she would like to replace me and have my awesome life. She said she would take revenge on mom and dad for depriving her of having a life like I do. It got me worried, but she made me powerless. For the second time, she injected me again, so I passed out. Next thing I remember, I'm in a dark room with just a bed, a pillow, and a blanket. This must be her room. I'm locked inside the mental institution, just like in the movies. She managed to make my friends believe that she is me. She's clever. They went shopping, they partied, and they did not even realize that something was wrong. She must really be pulling it off. Even my parents and my boyfriend are not suspecting a thing. But our prom is almost here. Me and my friends are all excited for it. But I think I have to give up the dream of going since I'm locked up in here. I just miss my friends, I miss my parents, I miss my boyfriend, and I miss my life. It hurts me that I've been missing for a while, and they didn't even notice or feel that it's Patricia and not me. She's just a stranger to them. After 1 week, I made friends with the security staff. They kept on asking why I was so kind and polite to all of them. I tried to tell them the truth, but they just made me drink some medicine because they thought I was hallucinating. Then a surprise happened. My parents visited me. I mean, they visited Patricia? I don't know. When I saw them, I gave them a hug. I miss you. I'm so glad you're okay. Are you guys hurt or anything? My mom answered, Honey, why would we be hurt? I know my mom would believe me. My dad's judgment is not always the best. Mom, this is me, Nancy. She switched us. She tied me up and she hurt me. And then my dad interrupted. Enough, Patricia. Dad, I am Nancy. I said enough. You've pulled this trick before, and why on earth do you think this is going to work again? I pleaded so hard, but my dad threatened that they would leave if I still insist. So I just cried. I love my dad, but he's never around, so no wonder we don't have a great relationship. I wonder if he even knows when my birthday is. I mean, our birthday. But then again, I don't want to judge him. I know he's just trying to be tough. But I looked at my mom. I can see in her eyes that she truly feels sorry for me, whether she thinks I'm Nancy or Patricia. Honey, I know things haven't been great, but a promise is a promise. A promise? Yes, we will not break our promise, which is when your doctor says you're ready to go, we will bring you back home. I cried and I had a meltdown. I just couldn't help it. Mom, I am Nancy. Please believe me, please. My dad ordered the staff to drag me out of their sight, but when they tried to grab me by my arms, I resisted, so my shirt got torn apart, baring my shoulders. My parents saw this, and they were shocked. My mom pointed on my left shoulder. Well, I had this weird birthmark on my left shoulder. Maybe they recognized it. My mom looked at my dad and said, She is Nancy. My dad told the staff to leave us alone to talk. He gave me a hug and said, I'm sorry. How did this happen? Why are you here? When did you meet your twin sister? My mom said. I told them how Patricia executed her plan, but I asked them how they knew it was me. They looked at each other. My dad gave my mom a slight nod as if saying it's time to let me know. When you were 3, I left you and Patricia upstairs to play. When I got back, I saw you on the floor with a pencil stabbed on your left shoulder. We saw Patricia holding a hammer, and your head was also bleeding, which resulted in loss of your memories. We thought you were dead. My mom did not finish the story. She started crying while leaning on my dad's chest. My dad continued, The doctor said that if we wasted just a couple of seconds more, you might not be with us. And he let out a sigh. I have an uncle with the same situation as Patricia. The genes must have passed on to her. I'm sure that there's something wrong with her. So even at a young age, we made a special program for her to be admitted here. We had high hopes that she will become normal. I absent-mindedly responded, You recognized me because of the scar on my shoulder? I thought it was just a weird birthmark.
What are you gonna do with Patricia now? Mom and Dad went home and proceeded to my room right away. Patricia didn't know that my parents are aware of what happened. They gave her a hug. My parents apologized to her. We are sorry. We love you, and this is the only way we know you would be better. She instantly knew that my parents knew, and she ran away. My mother called the police but instructed them to never hurt Patricia. Patricia is a very smart girl. She went to a party with Lucy, Sheila, and my boyfriend. She told them, I have a twin sister and she's trying to kill me. They just all laughed at her. Then I arrived, but instead of making things better, it validated her statement. Oh my goodness, there's two of you? My boyfriend said. I said, guys, it's me, Nancy. Do not believe her, I'm Nancy, she's my evil twin, Patricia said. Come on, this is me, we all grew up together. I said, then I looked at my boyfriend. Babe, you seriously didn't know it wasn't me? Babe, don't listen to her, Patricia said. Can someone prove who the real Nancy is, please? Sheila said. I had no choice but to reveal the secrets we have just to prove that I am the real Nancy. My friends got convinced in no time. They all ran to my side and were afraid of Patricia. Instead of helping, my boyfriend Marco, he ran away. Seriously, I think you should break up with him, Patricia told me. Then to our horror, she pulled out a gun and pointed at us. We all gasped. I enjoyed having your life and I'm trying to make it permanent. Oh, by the way, you got accepted to Harvard, but I think I'll be the one going there instead. She pulled the trigger, but surprisingly, Marco jumped in front of the bullet. Turns out he just left to call the police. He went back because he knows something bad is going to happen. Marco was shot, but we heard the police siren. Patricia fired another shot, but thankfully the police were able to stop her. Now, let's fast forward to the prom day. 2 weeks ago, when Marco got shot in the shoulder and Patricia was put back in the mental institution with more security this time. Good thing is, Mom and Dad decided to visit her more often to help her recover. The doctor said she would be better if we always visited her. I enjoyed the prom. We danced all night and I finally shared my first kiss with Marco. But the sad part is, we decided to break up. We are going to different colleges, and I know that our relationship should not weigh us down. We could have a lot of opportunities. We made a pact that if ever we finish college after 4 years and we're still single, then we'll be back together. Before taking off to college, I visited Patricia. I know she hates me, but I told her that I love her, and I forgive her. I also made a deal with her that every summer I will visit and make memories with her. I told her that I would like to get to know her, and here I am now. After 4 years, I graduated at Harvard University. I majored in psychology, and I'm doing research now with my colleagues about Patricia's case. As for Marco, well, he's already taken. While I was gone, he took care of Patricia, just like how I always requested during our phone calls. He got to know her and he fell for her, because despite her crazy mind, a good heart is lying within. Weird, I know, but that is how life goes. Besides, Patricia deserves a second chance, just like everyone else.
My name is Keanu, and I'm 13 years old. I am a psychopath. I freely admit it in front of all of you. I attribute my sickness solely to my father, because any story about a cruel father pales in comparison to my father. He would abuse me physically, mentally, verbally, and emotionally in every given moment. He left no stone unturned in this regard. He would beat me into unconsciousness. He accused me of being the cause of my mother's death, who died during my childbirth. Whenever Dad had any problem at home, he would accuse me of being the cause of it. One time he even beat me at school when my teacher called him to school because I had beat up my classmate who had beaten me up first. I tried to explain to him, but he wouldn't listen, and he just beat me even more. One day, it was fun day at school, and everyone was supposed to invite their parents to visit the school for party and introduction activities. I chose not to invite my dad, so I was alone at the festivities. I felt envious of all my classmates for having loving parents to have fun with. My teacher noticed me alone, came over and offered to be my parent for the day. I was so happy. We had great fun together. Miss Linda had lost both her husband and her son in a plane crash, only she had survived. After fun day had passed, Miss Linda showed more interest in me. She would bring me sandwiches and spend time with me during breaks. I thought of her as my mom. When I succeeded in my final exams, she hugged me with tears of joy. I unconsciously said, "Thanks, Mom." I went home happy that day, but had to face my dad again. He asked me why I was late coming home, and I told him about having to pass my final exams. He didn't believe me, though, and asked me to show him proof. Unfortunately, I had none, so he began kicking and punching me. There was a knock on the door. He tried to block me from opening the door, but I managed to open it. Miss Linda was standing there. She glanced at my bruises and bloody face and moved between me and my dad to protect me from further abuse. Dad snarled and threatened her with a beating if she didn't leave immediately. But she hit him in the eyes with a blast of mace or pepper spray, and he went down to the floor in extreme discomfort, grabbing at his eyes. Miss Linda called the police, told them about Dad's child abusive nature, and had him arrested. Now I live with Miss Linda as my new mom. Dad is in prison, where I hope he stays till he dies or rots. Either outcome is okay with me.